Wait, you're a Bears fan and you're not subscribed to my channel? Before this video starts, make sure to 1. Hit the subscribe button below to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. 2. Hit the bell notification because you, my friend, are a diehard Bears fan. And 3. Like this video and tell all the Bears fans you know about the channel. Alright, that's better. Now that you're actually subscribed to the channel, make sure to bear down and enjoy this video. Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. I am super excited to officially announce that each episode of Keek on the Mic will finally be on Apple Podcasts. That's right. If you would like to listen to podcasts on the go, I finally said, you know what? It's time to make Keek on the Mic official and put it on Apple Podcasts. So if for some strange reason you don't want to see my face that day, you can just hear my voice on the go, in the car, on the radio, anywhere on Apple Podcasts. Please, please, please go to Apple Podcasts. In the search column, type in Keek on the Mic, a Chicago Bears podcast. Make sure you rate and review this podcast. That will be much appreciated. It was about time to finally get on Apple Podcasts. I used to be on Apple Podcasts, but I kind of stopped doing it for a while, but I'm officially back on the platform, so make sure you go check out the podcast on Apple Podcasts. There's a lot of stuff that happened this week, guys. A lot of stuff happened in Chicago, and each week I'm trying to make a more conscious effort to make longer podcast episodes, just like you guys requested. I know most of the time my episodes are a little bit shorter, but each week it's a goal of mine to make longer episodes, talk about the week, and what happened with the Chicago Bears, because it's really hard to sometimes get to every little thing and try to make videos about every little thing that happens with the Chicago Bears. So it will be easier for me to sometimes make longer podcast episodes to talk about everything at once. So that's going to be something I'm going to try out here on Keek on the Mic. Try to do longer episodes, and now you'll be able to watch it either on YouTube and you'll be able to listen to it on Apple Podcasts. So you have either option there. So to start out this episode of Keek on the Mic, I wanted to talk about something that has Chicago Bears fans buzzing a little bit. And that is the fact that the Bears decided to submit a bid to buy Arlington Racetrack, which is about 30 miles from Soldier Field. And this has been a rumor for quite some time now. But I wasn't really sure if the Chicago Bears were actually going to go through with it. We do realize that Soldier Field is old. It needs some renovation. It's one of the older stadiums in the NFL, along with Lambeau Field. And it may be time to make some renovations. So I don't necessarily blame the Bears for considering this as an option for them. We need to keep in mind, though, that the Bears still have a lease at Soldier Field through 2033. So this plan to possibly buy Arlington Racetrack and move to Arlington probably wouldn't happen for quite some time. It's still interesting that the Chicago Bears put in a bid. It really is interesting. It's going to be something to keep a lookout for years to come. Will they actually do it? We don't know. But do the Chicago Bears need a change? Maybe so. Maybe this is what they need to do. I think it's about time to either move and build a new stadium or stay and finally renovate Soldier Field. Obviously, most Bears fans have been to a game at Soldier Field. It is very, very old. It can use some TLC for sure. So I would actually like to see a renovation. If that means they move to Arlington and get a new stadium, I think that would be really, really cool for the Chicago Bears. And I think all fans should somewhat be on board. I know there's a lot of history at Soldier Field. I get that. And I don't necessarily want them to leave Soldier Field. But if this is what they need to do, then that's what they're going to have to do. And it would be really cool to see a new stadium. Maybe they even get a freaking cover so there will be no more harsh, cold games. Because let me tell you, The one time, my very first game was in December in Chicago at Soldier Field, and being from California, that cold weather hit me right in the face. And I'm not going to sit here and lie. I loved every second of it. Yes, it was cold. It was supposed to be the coldest game ever in Soldier Field history, but I loved every second of it. And I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. So yeah, there's a lot of good memories that all you Bears fans may have of Soldier Field, but it's definitely time to upgrade Soldier Field. So we'll see what happens. This is going to be a story to keep an eye on, like I said, for years to come. But let me know down below how you guys feel about this report that the Bears put a bid to buy the Arlington racetrack. Here's the funny thing about this story, and this is the main thing I really want to talk about in today's podcast, is Chicago's mayor, Lori Lightfoot. She issued a statement, and she really didn't hold back on her thoughts about the Chicago Bears possibly moving in the near future. This is what the mayor of Chicago had to say about the report. Our city is home to some of the world's finest sports teams who have played a vital role in the city's reopening. As part of the city's recovery, many organizations are doubling down on their commitment to Chicago, and we expect the Chicago Bears to follow suit. The Bears are locked into a lease at Soldier Field until 2033. In addition, this announcement from the Bears comes in the midst of negotiations for improvements at Soldier Field. This is clearly a negotiating tactic that the Bears have used before. As a season ticket holder and longtime Bears fan, I am committed to keeping the Chicago name in our football team. And like most Bears fans, we want the organization to focus on putting a winning team on the field, beating Packers, and finally being relevant past October. Everything else is noise. So as you can see, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, she didn't hold back on her opinions on this report. She clearly is maybe a little bit frustrated that the Bears are considering moving. And like she said, this is a tactic that they've used before to try to get renovations to Soldier Field, which to me is a very smart tactic. But if she sits here and says, that this is what the Bears are doing, then, hey, Mayor Lightfoot, try to figure it out. Help the Chicago Bears out to get this done so they don't have to leave Soldier Field. Help them renovate Soldier Field, make it nicer, so they don't have to leave to Arlington. And honestly, her talking mess about, it's true stuff, but it's like she may need to focus on other things going on in Chicago rather than talking mess about being relevant in October and beating the Packers, which it's all true stuff. But when this came out and she was talking mess, I'm not going to sit here and lie, it kind of bothered me. At first, I thought it was kind of hilarious, but then after reading it, I'm like, she is seriously kind of upset about this, which most Bears fans kind of were. It was kind of like half and half. Half the Bears fans were like, oh, okay, they need to renovate anyways. That would probably be good. New stadium, cool. And half Bears fans are like, what are you doing? I don't want you guys to leave. But at the end of the day, the Chicago Bears may need this change. And like the mayor of Chicago said, this can easily be a tactic to hopefully in the near future renovate Soldier Field. And like I said earlier in the podcast, the Bears have at least through 2033, and that is a pretty long time. So this is definitely, like I said, something to keep an eye on, but nothing to really panic about quite yet. And I just don't want people to panic, okay? I know this report came kind of out of nowhere. Like I said, it's been a rumor. I know I talked about it before a little bit on the podcast, but this is not something to panic about quite yet. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. So that's the first thing I really wanted to discuss with you. I'm glad I got that off my chest. The second thing is that the Bears obviously had the veteran minicamp. It was the mandatory minicamp that it's mandatory. Players need to show up. Obviously, Allen Robinson showed up. A lot of people thought he was going to hold out. Allen Robinson is a true professional. I just want to make that known. Allen Robinson is that dude. I am this close to getting Allen Robinson's jersey because he is that guy. He's a true professional. He's all about business. He's letting the contract situation take care of itself. Hopefully it does happen. I'm starting to lean towards that the Bears will possibly get a deal done before that July 15th deadline. That is the hope. But something that surprised me along with a lot of other Bears fans is that the fact that Eddie Goldman did not show up to any of the 3 days of the mandatory veteran minicamp, which was a surprise to most. Obviously, Eddie Goldman opted out last year because of the whole COVID thing, and we just signed him before the whole COVID situation. We signed him to a pretty massive extension, so we expected him to show up to this year's mandatory minicamp. But Matt Nagy does not seem too concerned. Matt Nagy did say that it was an unexcused absence, but expects Goldman to be back for training camp in July. Then they talked to Danny Trevathan, and he said that he is in constant contact with Eddie Goldman, and he also expects Goldman to be at training camp in July. Danny Trevathan also said something that kind of pointed out to me that he made it very clear that Eddie Goldman loves the Chicago Bears. He's excited to come back. I'm not sure what's going on. I know the Bears community is kind of giving Eddie Goldman a tough time for showing up. It is a little odd. It was a surprise, but I wouldn't panic quite yet. Obviously, the Bears, right after they realized that Eddie Goldman didn't show up, I think they panicked a little bit. They did bring in defensive lineman after minicamp, which I'll go into in a little bit. But I don't think we should panic at all. I think it's very normal. A lot of Bears fans were saying that maybe Eddie Goldman's not in shape. I don't think that's the case. I don't really know what it is. I just hope he comes to training camp because obviously this defense needs Eddie Goldman back, healthy, ready to play, because obviously it was a big hole missing in that defense when Eddie Goldman opted out, and he just completes that very good defensive line that the Chicago Bears defense has to offer. So after the conclusion of camp, which went very well, I know I did a couple updates on the podcast, but mandatory minicamp went really, really well. I feel like Justin Fields and Andy Dalton did very well, and we'll get into that a little bit later because I can't forget about the quarterback competition. But after the conclusion of minicamp, the Bears signed tight end Jake Butt, D-line Mike Pennell, and offensive lineman Tyrone Whitley Jr., and this was after tryouts of the mandatory minicamp. Jake Butt was obviously the standout signing here for me personally. He only played 8 games in 4 years with the Broncos. He was a 5th-round pick out of Michigan in 2017 by the Broncos. And to me, if he can stay healthy, I think this is a solid pickup for the Chicago Bears. This is a guy that I liked out of the draft in 2017. It just didn't go our way. I was hoping the Bears would pick them in the 2017 draft, but it just didn't go our way. And he just couldn't stay healthy. He was very good tight end out of Michigan. I believe he tore his ACL before he got drafted in 2017, and that's why he dropped down the draft boards and got picked in the 5th round. But I think he's a very solid tight end when healthy. There's not a lot of game tape on him because he only played 8 games in 4 years with the Denver Broncos. So this can be a risky signing, but at the same time, you look at a situation, for example, like Allen Robinson. When he tore his ACL, the Bears took a risk on Allen Robinson. Now Allen Robinson is our best offensive player that we have. So this signing of Jake Butt it can be risky, but at the same time, if it works out, that would be great news. I can only imagine in some of our offensive sets, you can have Jake Butt, Cole Kmet, Jimmy Graham, Allen Robinson out there. I feel like Jake Butt is a very solid tight end. I feel like he has a lot to prove. I just think he needed a change of scenery. Obviously, it didn't work out with Denver due to injuries. I think he has a lot to prove. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jake Butt offers to the Chicago Bears offense. So I want you guys to answer below in the comment section. How do you guys feel about this Jake Butt signing? And how do you feel that he would fit into the Chicago Bears offense? I'm really curious to see what you guys think. So here's another situation after, like I said, after the mandatory minicamp, though, everyone was so excited to see Andy Dalton basically versus Justin Fields. I feel like there was a competition, and I feel like a lot of Bears fans still think there's a quarterback competition. But Chicago Bears and Matt Nagy made it very clear. They do not plan for rookie quarterback Justin Fields to start the season opener, as Coach Matt Nagy reiterates, Andy Dalton is our starter. It's just so hard for me to believe Matt Nagy because I know he can easily pull the trigger. It's just hard for me to believe him because it's just, you're telling me if Justin Fields outplays Andy Dalton in training camp, in preseason, you're telling me that he's not going to start? That's just really hard for me to believe. I'm not saying that Andy Dalton's a bad quarterback, but I'm just saying if Justin Fields is the better quarterback, don't you think that he should get the opportunity to start? And it's like if the team rallies around Justin Fields and they realize that Justin Fields is the better quarterback, but then you still start Andy Dalton, how do you think that's going to make the locker room feel? What do you think? What do you think they're going to think about that? And that's not how you want to start the year. But I do also understand where Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are coming from. They do not want to rush Justin Fields. They want to develop him. I think he's ready to play right now. But at the same time, they're trying to recreate that Patrick Mahomes type of feeling that Kansas City had back in 2017. I just wish they would separate that. Patrick Mahomes is a totally different player than Justin Fields and vice versa. It's just hard for me to believe Matt Nagy sometimes because it's just, and I know a lot of Bears fans probably feel the same way I do. If he is better than Andy Dalton, I feel like he deserves a chance to start, but at the same time, I do understand where Matt Nagy is coming from because here's the thing. We did pay Andy Dalton $10 million for 1 year, which is a whole bunch of money. It's a whole bunch of money. It's actually a ridiculous amount of money, especially considering what Mitch Trubisky got in Buffalo, which is only $2.5 million. So I understand where they're coming from. I think Andy Dalton, as much as sometimes I hate the idea, I do feel that Andy Dalton starts weeks 1 through 4, no matter what. I think he starts weeks 1 through 4, no matter what. Even if we go 0-4, he will be the starting quarterback, which kind of sucks, but it's like, whatever. We got to throw him out there for a couple games at least because we paid him a whole bunch of money. $10 million is a lot of money, and that's the situation now we're in. This is something that Matt Nagy said about the whole situation. We all get excited about Justin Fields, he said. We'd all be lying if we said something different. With that said, we're excited about Andy Dalton too. And we know that if we stick to this plan that we have, that everything is going to be just fine. Justin Fields is clear about the plan. He understands that's what the Bears want to do. Obviously, Justin Fields is a competitor. Justin Fields even brought up something saying that he is ready to help the Bears win no matter if he is the starter or the backup. And that is the type of energy that I like from Justin Fields. And I'm excited to see this play out. You know, obviously, I won't believe it until Andy Dalton takes the very first snap in the week 1 opener against the Rams. But until then, I still think there's a QB competition. I have a tough time believing Matt Nagy sometimes, and that is honestly not going to change for me personally. But that is all I have for today's episode of Keek on the Mic. Like I said, Keek on the Mic is officially on Apple Podcasts, so make sure you go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review Keek on the Mic. That would be much appreciated. Make sure you also hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. Make sure you follow me on my Instagram page and Twitter account at Keek on the Mic. And make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears episode right here on Keek on the Mic. Thanks, guys.
Now Now this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan.
That boy is Benny Hunter.
Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. In Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.